Run! It's not safe here, run!
Personal development is a never-ending trial, one that involves introspection and self-improvement. However, if one only looks inward, it is easy to lose sight of what stands around us. People in our lives also play a role in how we develop as individuals. The influence of others helps to shape our sense of identity. This can be from family, school, church, or the community itself. During the trial of the swamp, we see what influence that the villagers from Senua's home had on her. Much like the previous trial, the environment plays a role in understanding the purpose of it. Senua finds herself on the outset of a village that has collapsed into a swamp. Putrid gas rises from the waters, making it difficult to breathe. The Furies admit that there is a creepy feeling in the air. Despite the red flags, she drops into the infected waters and travels through the sunken buildings. The perception of this water as being a swamp is linked to an event in her past. A story is told by the narrator that involves a time Senua went to the river with Dillion and his friends. While there, she felt something was wrong with the water, telling the others not to get in. Sensing it, but not knowing the exact details, she correctly identified that a pathogen of unknown origin was present. Due to her history with seeing things others could not, the others simply laughed at her warnings. This simple trip to the river led to a plague breaking out in her home village, killing many of them. This set into motion a chain of events that both led to her village turning on her and the exacerbation of her condition. At this point in time, Senua had been suffering from a form of psychosis for most of her life. Common symptoms include delusions and hallucinations. The word hallucination is based upon the Latin word hallucinare, meaning to wander in the mind, and it involves perceiving things with the senses that are not objectively real. Delusions are defined as a fixed, false belief that conflicts with reality. However, there is another definition of delusion that more appropriately applies to her. As seen at the river, Senua perceives a pathogen in the waters with her second sight that the others cannot. This aligns with the second definition, a fixed, false belief that is contradicted by what is generally accepted as reality. While at the river, she perceives a murky swamp rather than clean flowing water that the others do. Just because the average populace perceives things in one way doesn't mean that this is all there is to the world. We see this in nature. Sharks have a sense called electroreception, which gives them the ability to perceive information from electrical signals, something humans are incapable of. Animals such as bullfrogs or salmon can perceive infrared, a wavelength of light outside of the visible spectrum. When the water gets too murky to see normally, an enzyme is activated which allows them to see different wavelengths and help them move around better. Just because we cannot perceive it doesn't mean it's not real. Using the second definition of the word, Senua's delusions caused by her sixth sense allowed her to recognize a pathogen when the others could not. As no one believed her, the plague was contracted and spread throughout the village. This is symbolized in the level design by the buildings of her village collapsing into the swamp, being consumed by it, the swamp being the pathogen itself. Because of her stigma within the community, she was blamed for the deaths. This can be represented by the trial found inside the wooden shack. Inside, Senua stands before a wooden gate that guards the trial itself. Emblazoned on the front are 3 more runes, 2 of which have been seen before during the trial of Surt. Thurasas, meaning thorn or giant, represents multiple things. As mentioned before, it is the threat that awakens the will to action, or that which shatters resistance to change. By extension, it involves conflict and destruction. In one interpretation, it can show wild rage. This is willpower executed with no conscious thought, only pure instinct. Algis is another rune we have seen before, meaning elk. It primarily is used as a means for divine blessing or protection. This is only one aspect of it though. Algis can be described as the pathway between humans and the gods, allowing for the invocation of divine might. Or on the flip side, the ability to awaken the mind from physical into the spiritual. The last of these runes is new. It is called Uas, or the yew tree. The yew is an evergreen, meaning it keeps its leaves throughout the winter months. As such, this symbol involves immortality and the initiation into the mysteries of life and death. Yua's includes the ability to invoke communication with the underworld, just as Senua and her mother do. One lesson learned from this rune is that the fear of death is an inhibitor to human potential. Based upon this description, it is easy to see why this particular symbol is highly relevant to the entire plot of Hellblade. With this in mind, let us head through the gate. Waiting inside is a maze that contains the symbols hidden throughout. Senua must locate them while avoiding a pursuer. Like everything else in this reality, the ominous figure represents an aspect of her trauma. In this case, the embodiment of the villagers who blamed her for the plague. Even though she is the one who warned them, her advanced knowledge of this tragedy was interpreted as her causing it. Galena mentioned as much.
Senua, don't cry. The world needs people like us, because we reveal the secrets that they are blind to. Sometimes when we dream of a coming storm, they may think we've brought the storm with us. What they say about me is not true. They are just scared. We must forgive them.
One way to look at this figure is that the villagers were consumed by Thurasa's energy. Conflict, wild rage, willpower executed with no conscious thought. The rational thinking of the villagers is non-existent, fueled only by their pure instinct and fear. Dillion tells her as much when he attempts to console her.
They're blaming me for the plague. They say that I'm cursed. What if they're right?
How would they know such a thing? Are they gods? None of us are. They're just people. Good people, but they're scared. They're afraid of what they can't see. Like children scared of the dark.
When inside the maze, the instinct is to run away from this terrifying entity, to turn our backs on it and run towards the runes. However, in my experience, this is not the best course of action. By running away, Senua is unable to know where it is at any given time and can easily be cornered. If she occasionally turns around and keeps it in her field of vision, it becomes easier to avoid. If we spend our lives running away from what we fear, we are forever haunted by it. The lore stones throughout this area directly relate to this idea. One speaks of a Northman named Grettir. One night he was dragged into the moonlight by an undead beast.
He resisted with every ounce of his strength. He clung to the doorframe, but it gave way, and they spilled out of the house, and the monster fell back, and the moon shone down on its ghastly face. Grettir, terrified, cuts off its head, but is cursed forever. From that moment on, wherever he was, he would see those hideous eyes staring back at him.
In this context, Grettir's curse was a form of post-traumatic stress. Experiences such as these can leave a psychological scar, in other words, a curse. Senua's experience of watching a plague eat through her community, being blamed for it, witnessing her love break down because his father was one of the victims, it left a mental scar upon her. For years, she had attempted to reject the wicked words her father had said about her. That she was touched by darkness, cursed, an abomination. This trauma with the plague drove her to wonder if he was right all along. As a result of the villagers' actions and words, Senua convinced herself that these terrible things were true, cursing herself. This perceived affliction led her to the wilds in order to cure herself. The lesson learned during the trial of the swamp is just as relevant to Senua's experience as well as the villagers. Suffering from psychosis was a difficult enough task for her to endure by itself. The stigma of nearly everyone she knew made it impossible. While focused on our own individual battles, we forget that everyone else out there has their own internal struggles. In Senua's case, no one with the exception of Dylan even considered how she would be affected by this event. We must remember two things. Others can certainly influence your own inner world. However, you can have a profound effect on theirs as well. So in the end, we might as well have a positive influence upon others, rather than a negative one. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, please drop a like, as it really does help out the channel. If you would like updates on new uploads, feel free to subscribe or follow me on Twitter. Have a good day, and peace be with you all.